Hi, I'm Paul Seal from codeshare.co.uk. Last week I was at the Umbraco UK festival, and when I was there, I did one of the training sessions on the day before the festival. So if you ever go to the UK festival, it's a 2-day event. One day is all the talks, but the day before you do get a lot out of it. So you have the hackathon, and sometimes there's a training session on. And the training session that I went to was the one run by Ismail Maya called Hold My Beer. I think he's got to rename it to something else, and I suggested Hold My Beverage. Anyway, this course was just showing you about how to refactor anti-patterns and things like that, how to do things to improve the performance of the websites that we're building or that we inherit or pick up from clients that have had it built by people that were doing it maybe the wrong way or the old way. And one of the things that they covered on this little course was called donut caching. When I say little course, it's because it was only a half-day course. If you get a chance to do this at the UK Festival next year or at Code Garden, then definitely try and attend. I got a lot out of it. I got all the materials at the end of it, so I can take it away. I've got samples of how to do things better on my machine. So anyway, yeah, so the thing that I want to talk to you about today is donut caching. This week I did a blog article about it, just because it's something that I can go back to myself, and also if there's anybody that follows CodeShare, they can have a look and see that as well. Because one thing I found with some of the terms, like you hear the jargon and things like donut caching, I didn't have a clue. Unless you know what it is, you don't know what it is. So when I heard it mentioned by Emma Burstow in her Script article once, and she's saying, oh, she had this problem, and in the end the solution was donut caching. It was obvious and it was simple. Someone showed her what to do, but she didn't share the technical details of that because that's not what the article was about. But it had me thinking, well, what is it? And I could have gone and Googled it, but I didn't because I wasn't ready to try and learn it. But I wondered what it was. This is it. So just the video is for people that maybe don't follow blog posts as well, they follow videos. So it's going to make it let you see how easy it is to use, how simple it is to set up, and let's go ahead then. So what is it first of all? So as it says in the article, it's a way of letting you do some caching. So you don't have to cache everything. You can cache particular parts, like particular actions on your controllers and things like that. So the example that we had in the training course was where we were caching the footer content and the links and things like that. So instead of calling to get all the content every single time, and then doing that on each page load, it will just cache the result of that call. And so every time it would have gone to call it, it just does it for you. So in the article, I give you the details on how to install it. So let's go ahead and install it. So it's a NuGet package. I've got a project here that I'm working on, so I'm going to install it on this. So I like to install it using Package Manager Console. So if you'd like to do that as well, just copy this from the article, install package MVC donut caching, and I've got version 1.3.1-RC1, and that's just saying use the release candidate version, and actually that's quite old, that one is. So if you have a look at it, it's been out for, well, since 2016. So although it says release candidate, it does fix some issues. I think Dave Wursterberg, sorry if I said the name wrong, he said that he thinks it solves an issue with a post request. So yeah, use that version. So let's paste that in here. It's going to install into the project paulseal.web. I'm just going to hit enter. So that's going to pull down that NuGet package, install it for me, and then I will be able to get things set up to be able to start using donut caching. So the aim of this is that I want to get my navigation into a partial, and then I'm going to use the donut. I'm going to set up donut caching to cache the results of that partial. Now, when Mark Goodson gave me some feedback on this article that I wrote, he wondered why I wasn't mentioning cached partials, and it was because in the training session that they talked about it and the advantages and disadvantages with this and that, and what it was decided was that the cached partial, every time a publish happens, it will clear the cache on your cached partials. Whereas with this, you could leave your cache going for a year or longer or whatever for a particular part, and you can invalidate that separately. So that's why we liked this one. But different things apply in different places. Anyway, so that looks like it's installed. So the other thing as well is to get from the article the caching profiles that are created. So what these are is it just says 5 minutes, 1 hour, 1 day, and the durations. So I've just worked out the number of seconds for each of these, and so it allows you to, instead of putting in the numbers where they don't actually mean anything, when you use these, you say cache this for 1 day or 1 month. So where we need to put this, as it says in the article, put it in the web config file under system.web. So let's go to the web config. Let's find system.web, there it is, and just paste these in there. So now we've got our caching profiles in there. We've got the NuGet package installed. Next thing we need to, we can create a controller. Now I don't have the partial set up yet, so what I'm going to actually do before I create the controller is just get the partial set up. And I'm going to put it in a folder called site layout. I like to put things like footer, header, footer, navigation, and things like that in a folder called site layout. And then in that, I'm going to add a partial. I'm going to add a view, add new item. Now, when I was on the train, I sat next to Nick from Just Nick. I can't remember his web address, but yeah, justnick.me I think it is. Nick Remington, and he told me a good trick for this is to choose HTML page. If you're adding a partial, choose HTML page, but put the .cs in front, and then do the name of it. So I'm going to do main navigation, and that way it stops Visual Studio trying to be so helpful. Like, it will put that in, but you can delete that. So in this, I'm not necessarily passing in any model or anything like that. I don't need to at the moment. All I'm going to do is just take this navigation and I'm going to put it inside that partial and save that. Then I need to create the controller now. So I'm going to have a site layout controller, so I can just copy this and I can create myself a controller. So in my core folder, I've got controllers folder. I'm going to add a class and I'm going to call it site layout. Actually, what I will do is I'm going to do a folder called surface, because since I've learned about root hijacking and things like that with those MVC render controllers, I think it's a good idea to do to separate these controllers into the other folders. So I'm going to call this surface. I think on the course we separated it out into a folder called actions or something like that. Anyway, in there I'm going to add this class, which I will call site layout controller. And instead of just copying it all because I'll get the namespace, I'm just going to copy the inside of it without the namespace and paste it in there. And what you can see is it's referencing surface controller. So it wants me to import the reference for that. And I also need to reference the donut output cache one as well. So I've not done this before from a separate library. I'm wondering if the donut caching, because I've installed it on the web project, it might actually need a core library or something installing on the library project. So I'm just going to quickly go to that here and see if there's a dependency. So there are no dependencies. So that must mean then that I need to install it on there too. So a good way to install something, if it's already installed with a particular version, it's quite good to install it using this graphical user interface for it. So click on installed, and if I go to MVC donut and look for that, I can click on this. It'll tell me what project it's already installed and what version. Andy Felton mentioned this in the training as well. So I can just click on the core library, click on install, click on OK, and that should put that library in there for me. So now when I go back to this site layout controller, it will happily import that reference, and now I've got that reference correctly. So, and the path that I've copied in is correct because that's where I have my folder structure set up. So I've got views, partials, site layout, main navigation. So that's good, and this is getting the home page that I have, and then any children and passing that through. So I don't need to necessarily do that for this because I'm not at that stage with my project. I'm just going to be getting the actual contents of the partial. So I will leave it on anyway. So all it's saying is that it's going to pass in this model of IEnumerable iPublish content. So there's no harm in leaving that on really, and that is the plan to do something like that later. So I'll just do @model like that, and then say IEnumerable iPublish content. And then if I just bring that back over there, so that's my partial created, that's my controller created. I've got these namespaces that are grayed out up here that aren't being used. So if I do Control and U, ta-da, that does an edit, sort, and remove using statements. It's just a shortcut that I set up for myself. So there is a command that you can set up for that if you want to do that. Anyway, so if we look at this controller action, so I've got my controller, inherits from surface controller, I've got my references up here, and then I just want to say it's an action result that is render main navigation. Also notice this is child action only. When I've done videos before using surface controllers, I've not included that. I noticed Mark Goodson was replying to people on the Umbraco forum, advising that they do that. So the reason why we would do that is so that people can't just visit the URL of your domain /Umbraco/surface/ blah 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 to get to the result of that. If it's a child action only, then it can only be used from within the site on the page, so it can't be used via the URL route. So that's good to always add these on where necessary. And then this donut output cache, so this is us now applying this caching profile. So we're going to say that cache this navigation menu for 1 month. So anytime this gets requested, it will be either looked up from the cache first or then come to here. So, and then in the sample code, it gets the home page and then it gets the children of the home page. So just the first layer where they're visible. So if we have a look now back at the blog post, and this is giving you the navigation that I used in the sample. So this was for the Isle of Lashes website, but we're not working on Isle of Lashes this time, we're working on my paulseal.co.uk. Anyway, so let's just copy this action here. So this is the one that calls the action. So it's going to call this action from the template. So from master, where we had the navigation before, I'm just going to do html.action render main navigation and then site layout. So in theory that should be it. So if we can do a build, and then we can go to the page, and it should all render correctly. So if I go back to the website, F5, we should see that the navigation partial gets rendered as it should do, unless there are any errors that show up with me using that code for getting the home page and the children, because at the moment it's not set up like that in my website. So we'll see. It might even come back as nulls, but it has worked, so that's good. As I said, this is just basic markup. It's not been wired up properly yet. So let's see about testing that then. So, well, the first thing we want to do actually is to do the invalidation of the caching. So on the next part on this post, it just says invalidating the cache on publish. So that's what we'll do next, just so that we can, because I want to test it out, you see. And in order to test it out, I want to be able to invalidate it and just explain some things. So I'm going to copy the inside of that. I'm going to go to my core library. I'm going to have a handlers or events folder, yeah. I think I'll call it events. And then I will do a class called content events. And what's going in here is well, let me just paste this in and just explain it to you. So I'll import that. So this is going to run. This inherits from application event handler, and this gets registered at app start. And basically, on application started, it creates a listener. So whenever this event of content service.published is fired, we're going to attach this content service published event to it as well, so that it fires this. And in this event here, we have a list of document type aliases that we want this to invalidate the cache for. So I'm going to also include home on this one. So if home or content doc type or a pretty link doc type or a news list doc type are published, then it will go through, it will check to see if they're in that list, and it will remove that main navigation item from the cache. So that will be the invalidating of the cache. So if we save and publish, sorry, Control-Shift-B, so that will do my build. I don't mean save and publish. So I'm going to refresh the website now. Again, it's not going to look any different, but what I do want to do is just put the date and time of when it was cached in next to the name on the navigation. So I'm going to put that in here. So I'm just going to do @datetime.now. So we should see that normally, if I was to refresh that, you would see something. So that's not showing up for a start. So that's not picked up the change that I made to the partial. So because we're using caching, that's just pulling it straight from the cache. If I was to log in on the back office, so if I go to this /Umbraco, then I will be able to right, so I've logged in on the back office, and then if I save and publish the home page, which is the only content item that I have, that should invalidate the cache. And then if we refresh, then we should see the date and time being pulled through. So that's good. So that proves that what I set up for invalidating the cache, this code here, in the content events, is getting fired when something's published. It finds that it was the home page that was published. So because it is within that list, it then removes that from the cache. But also, if we refresh again, we would expect this time to change with the seconds. But because we've cached it, it's not changing. As you can see, it's just staying there. So that's the cache invalidation demonstrated, and that is also the fact that it is caching demonstrated as well. So it's really simple and easy to use. I quite enjoy using it, and I'm definitely going to do it, especially for things like navigation menus and things like that. So you could apply it to other places. On I Love Lashes, I applied it to the navigation and the footer content and other things that have to get values from somewhere. It's ideal for that, especially for pages where there's a lot of traffic and things. So if we go back to the article, so just talk about how to test it and things like that. And then Dave, I mentioned earlier, Dave Wurstenberg gave me some pointers. So he said about how you don't want this caching to be in effect when you're in preview mode from within Umbraco. So he said that what you can do is actually create your own custom attribute, and he gave the code here. Create your own custom attribute, and then that way it can check to see if it's in preview mode or not, and if it is in preview mode, then it won't use the cached version. So it sets the cache duration to 0. So you can do that. So then you would be using Umbraco donut output cache instead of the other one that we have here of just donut output cache. There. So that would be Umbraco donut output cache. So you can do that custom attribute. So that would be good. That will help with preview and things like that. And then he also mentioned about load balanced websites. So the event here that we talked about for the invalidating the cache, this content service published event, apparently that only gets triggered on the server where the publish happened if we're in load balanced. So say if you have load balancing set up and your website is on four instances somewhere, the one where you did the save and publish, apparently this published event will only run there. So that means that all the others won't pick up that change. But if instead of using those content events, if you use this page cache refresher, cache updated, and attach this clear cache event here, this clear cache method, then that will remove it from the cache, and that will do this event gets passed to all instances in a load balanced environment. So that's quite useful as well. I'm not using load balancing at the moment on my sites, so I'm not too concerned about implementing that, but I thought I'd include that in the article and in this video as well. So hopefully that gives you the introduction into donut caching, see how easy it is to use, how simple it is. If you like the video, please click on like, subscribe to my channel. I will be doing more and more videos. I've got loads of ideas of videos to do now. And yeah, please share with others. And also, I don't know if you've noticed on the website, I've got some new buttons now, so that if you like the article that you're on, you can just share it on Twitter, Facebook and LinkedIn, etc. If you want to connect to me on Twitter, I'm at CodeSharePaul, and you can also connect to me on LinkedIn as well if you want to. I think I've got my LinkedIn profile in here. Yeah, so you can connect to me on there. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next video.